Welcome to the live in the Carne Asada Bleed Los podcast post game show, whatever you want to call it. None of that matters because it's time for morning. You're joined by myself, Alonso Cinnamon, as we refer to him in some cases, Cody Snavely, and the babyface gimmick in the sky, Roger. The Los Angeles Dodgers go down. They go down 4-2 in Game 3 against the Arizona Diamondbacks in Phoenix, and their season is over. Season's donezo. And I'm going to be 1,000% honest with you. I think the sentiment with this loss, I think, is worse than even how last year ended against the Padres. I think this one hurts more because of just the prolific offense that didn't show up. So Cody, I'll start with you. How do you feel about everything right now after that loss?
Yeah, going back to last year, I didn't think it could get worse than that. The humiliation of dropping those three games in a row and losing in San Diego, especially after the season they had last year, 111 wins. Like, it got talked about to death all off season. I still hear about it even right now. I would say it's a little more embarrassing because I've been telling people, this D-backs team, they have a lot of young stars, but when you look at the Padres, we talked about it before, that was a team that had superstars and they put it together at the right time and they went on their run and they beat the Dodgers. The Dodgers really had pretty much every advantage of this series except for probably starting pitching, where you could say it was even because the D-backs had two starters. We had two starters, but they just fell flat on every facet of baseball. Shaky defense, not good starting pitching. The only thing that was the bright spot of this series was their bullpen, which, if you go back a couple months, that was like our biggest fear potentially going into October. We were like, all right, well, what's this bullpen going to do? But it ended up being the offense, which, deja vu, that's probably been the Achilles heel for the Dodgers for this entire run. Besides the years that they've either made the World Series or in 2020 when they won, the offense just didn't get going. And it's kind of embarrassing to see our top two hitters, who are obviously going to be 2-3 in the MVP this year, most likely, to just only get one hit and then let that one hit be an infield single that Freddie Freeman had to pretty much go all out for.
No, I think you're 1,000% right. As I watched this game, as a guy that played baseball, it was frustrating to watch, to say the least, just because the last thing you want is basically your offense just to not get going, right? Like everything else is your bullpen's jiving, right? Truthfully, with Lance Lynn giving up, I mean, and correct me if I'm wrong, Roger, because I'm leading to you. Lance Lynn giving up 3 bombs in any other instance, I think, is not a problem because the offense that you have on the other side, right? Like you feel good with those guys going out there and kind of making up that difference. But I wanted to ask you, since you and I hadn't had a chance to talk on here yet, how by the way, if you're joining us, thank you for the comments. I don't have my glasses on, so I apologize. I think it's D Brafferty 100. Sell the team. That's my favorite one so far. But no, thank you for your engagement, guys. We really appreciate you guys joining us. We'll go look at some of those comments here in a minute. But Roger, I wanted to ask you, when those 3 bombs were given up, how did you feel at that point?
I mean, it was kind of expected, right? I mean, you hear it was still pretty hot in Arizona today. The roof was open, so you kind of expected the ball was going to fly. After he had gotten through the first couple innings, you're hoping, okay, you give him a couple more innings. But then, the first home run, the second home run, you're like, crap, what the hell's going on? And I mean, you don't expect the guy to give up 4 home runs, right, in one inning. And, and you thought it was 3, and then the next pitch, he ends up getting the 4th home run anyway. So it's like, I mean, I don't know. Maybe the trigger should have been a little bit faster. A lot of people are mentioning, maybe as soon as that first home run, you put somebody has to be up, right? I mean, Torre Lavello had somebody up as soon as he gave up a single, right? He pulled his starter. So, I mean, I don't know if that would have helped anything there. But I mean, to me, it all boils down to the offense. The offense never got going. You can't have your stars, Mookie Betts and Freddie Freeman, one hit, right? It starts with them. And if they didn't do anything in this series, and here's the result: Dodgers get swept out of the NLDS. And like you said, I think it's far worse this year than the Padres series from last year, because that I told you guys that series, both teams sucked. They both, none of them were hitting, and the Padres were able to get those hits to eventually give them the win. Dodgers just got their asses kicked. No other way about it.
No, they got outplayed, and the reason, by the way, I went with the 3 home runs instead of 4 is I felt like the momentum shifted once the foul ball obviously was called a foul ball, right? And then he comes back and crushes that, like, no doubter, right? And I feel like at that point, that's when the momentum shifted, and you could kind of feel like the air kind of got taken out of the Dodgers. Am I wrong in kind of looking at it that way?
No, I mean, essentially, like we discussed on the live last time, where I said the Dodgers really needed to get a lead to kick off the game. Unfortunately, they didn't get a chance to do that. And I would say a 3-run game, 2-run game is a lot more manageable. But once you start getting to that 4th-run territory, it starts becoming an uphill battle. And we saw that pretty much all series long. So, like you said, that's like a knockout punch almost, because, we get bailed out by the foul ball, and then he just says, okay, I'm going to deposit this into deep center field in a pretty big outfield in Chase Field. So, it was definitely a huge blow. I was shocked that I've been shocked this entire series by the lack of either mound visits or pacing around the mounds, or getting guys, like Roger said, like as soon as that first home run or that second home run, why didn't they have somebody like pacing in the bullpen? Why didn't Roberts or the pitching coach Mark Pryor go out there to just talk? I feel like all 3 games you've had moments that they didn't do that, and at the end of the day, that's accountability to the coaches. So I'm curious, like, why no one did that with Lynn, and why didn't they just have why didn't they pull Lynn a lot quicker than that? Because they were pretty fast with Bobby Miller. Obviously Kershaw, they may have waited too long. He only got 1 out, but I'm surprised that Lynn didn't get hooked first.
I will say I was surprised that the lack of mound visits with Bobby Ice in that game, because that's one of those where it's like, hey man, let's get you to settle down. This is, you're doing this right. Let's keep working on this. That's sort of stuff that they talk on the mound. I was surprised that they didn't do that with Lance after the second home run, because at the end of the day, like sometimes you could tell, and again, I don't know Lance Lynn, but just at least from the camera angles, you could tell he was either flustered or just kind of perplexed as to what was going on. And it's also just super possible he just didn't have his stuff after, kind of going through the lineup a couple times, right? So, I mean, that's a very real thing. And so that was one thing that I took away from that. But I agree with you 1,000%. I'm really shocked that the leash was as long as it was on Lance, and that they weren't trying to kind of mitigate, hey, let's not do this again, because it's already happened twice. Let's just try to kind of keep the damage to a minimum. Dude, Mookie Betts having the series that he had, like obviously an unforgettable one, but that, considering why you brought him, right? Why you gave him that contract, what you expect with him. Like I'm just really confused. Am I looking a little too deep into the rabbit hole, or am I right in looking at it that way, Roger?
No, I mean, it's exactly why you brought him. It's exactly why you bring the stars, right? You have Mookie, you have Freddie. You expect them to deliver. I mean, I was watching the Phillies game earlier today. Freaking Bryce Harper is playing out of his mind for the Phillies, right? In the playoffs, right? And that's what stars do. They shine in this moment. And I mean, you even get people, guys that aren't stars that will come up and shine in this moment. But when you look at the Dodgers line, and that's what I thought this year was going to be different. I thought, they got guys like Hayward, Rojas. These guys will come in clutch in situations, right, and be able to get some big hits. That's going to help them. But it's like nothing. It's like the exact same thing that we see every single year. once the bright lights of October hit, a lot of these guys just they don't know how to deal with it, or I don't know what happens, and they just go away.
Well, and we, talking about that stat that we talked about, right, where for the first time in franchise history, with 4 players with the 100+ RBI, that's Mookie Betts, Max Muncy, JD Martinez, and Freddie Freeman. This series, only one of them had an RBI, and it was JD Martinez. Looking at the names on that list, I would never expect that the one RBI would be from JD Martinez. No disrespect to JD, but when you got Mookie Betts and Freddie Freeman on a list, you would think they would at least account for a few, right? And especially with how prolific of a hitter Freddie Freeman is, again, maybe that's how you know baseball is just like golf. It's a cruel, cruel sport, because when it's going, it's going. But when it's going bad, it's going bad. So real quick, let's look at some of these comments. And thank you again for everyone chiming in. I will stand by this statement once again, because Cody and I talked about it. This is not Dave Roberts' fault. None of this is Dave Roberts' fault. And the reason you're not going to fire Dave Roberts, give me 3 names of managers that are equal to or better than Dave Roberts that the Dodgers can hire tomorrow. And I guarantee that list is going to be maybe one name. And I don't even know who that name would be, if I'm completely honest. They should not fire Dave Roberts. This is not his fault. Really, the only mistake that was made that Cody and I talked about, you could say, if we're splitting hairs, is the lack of mound visits. And that would either be on Pryor, that could be on Dave, could be on either, right? If anyone needs to be held accountable, it's for the roster construction, and that's Andrew Friedman. But Andrew Friedman isn't going to hold himself accountable. I mean, that's just the reality. One of the where is this comment? I seen it a moment ago, and I have to find it. Where is it? Sorry, guys, I don't have my glasses on. So, I really should wear them, but I don't, because it reflects. What did Mookie do last year? Roger?
Nothing. I mean, he's got what? 2 hits, 3 hits, right? Going back
3
last couple.
Yeah. So, but people wanting to consider trading him, I don't think that fixes the problem. And also, trading that contract would be tough. Yeah. I mean, I don't even see that.
I can't see an argument when I get people are coming with anger and frustration, but we'll just put it out there right now. They're not trading Betts. They're not trading Freeman. They're not blowing up the team.
No, they're not selling the team.
Yeah, they're definitely not selling the team.
No.
And like you said, Freeman's not going to admit that he was wrong last year, even after how disappointing the season was. He pretty much admitted what we all know still, is that the postseason, it's a different animal. It is you can't manage it correctly. There's no one way to manage or whatever. There's no one way to play. Some teams get hot at the right time, but it's pure chaos. Yeah. And Freeman admitted to that last year, and there is truth to that. But then Roger even mentioned, there's just some players that are just built for October, and I don't know if it's something like Betts is a superstar player. Yeah. But even when he was in Boston, I didn't look at that team where he won the MVP that year. They won the World Series, but he wasn't the guy that won the World Series for them. Got them to the postseason, but there were so many guys in that lineup that helped him out.
If you remember the MVP for that series, I can't even remember his name.
Pierce. Yeah,
Steve Pierce. It was just one of those guys that stepped up in that moment, and he won the MVP in that World Series.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you look back at the prolific Yankees years, right? They had that stacked roster, but who did they all look at as Mr. Consistency? Bernie Williams. Is Bernie Williams considered a superstar? I would say no. He was a great, he's the Rick Fox to Shaq as he was Bernie to Derek Jeter, right? So I mean, that's just the way it goes. It's never the superstar guy per se that carries it up. To your point, Roger, Bryce Harper is playing out of his mind, and I would argue that Bryce Harper is also underpaid, because my man is out playing that contract so far. But that's another issue to discuss. I do want to ask you this though. I was thinking about this because someone texted me this during the game. Season's over, right? What you're the armchair GM. I'll ask you first, Cody. what's the first thing that you do the second that you look at what this is and what you do to fix it?
I mean, it's hard because when you look at the regular season, that's the first thing they're going to look at. And over a course of a 162 season, I mean, their offense, they failed them in October again, but they were still probably the second best offense in the sport, where they were just under the Atlanta Braves, who they're also on the brink of elimination coming into tomorrow. So it's hard to fix, but the Dodgers have a lot of holes. They have a lot of 1-year contracts, a lot of guys that have that are getting into their ARB years, club options. I think you're going to see a lot of turnover, but obviously the biggest one is probably pitching, and it's specifically starting pitching. And there's a couple arms this offseason that are definitely going to get paid. We talked about Blake Snell before, Aaron Nola. He shoved today. He's definitely going to be a guy that there's already teams rumored to be interested in him. I just think the way things have shaken out with the Dodgers the past couple years, they are very desperate for a frontline starter, especially since the whole Julio Urias situation. Walker Buehler's having his second Tommy John. I mean, we don't really mention his name, but Bauer was technically supposed to be in their plans at this point in that contract, and they ended up getting bit in the back with that one, and they're still on the hook for that money this year. People were commenting all on Twitter, well, at least they got under luxury tax. They didn't get under the luxury tax this year. They still had to pay it, not as much as last year, but I think they have to look somewhere for starters. I think they have to be active in the trade deadline or the off season for the trade market. See what teams are moving on from certain guys, and then get you a frontline starter, because even if you do bring Kershaw back, which I would say is probably a 70% chance that he comes back, because he could either retire, go to Texas, or just come back. He's not going to be a guy that you can have being the 1-2 in this rotation. And we just pretty much got confirmation of that from this October. So starting pitching would be my number one thing.
Before I go to you, Roger, breaking news: Sports Empire in the house. He's evidently he's also thinking we need a fresh new manager. I asked for 3 names, folks. Give me 3 names, and then we can litigate it. That's all I'm asking. I'm always happy to litigate and debate and all that jazz, but all I'm asking, the criteria is give me 3 names that are either equal or better to Dave Roberts. Roger, same question to you. You're the armchair GM. What are you doing tomorrow?
I mean, I think pitching is going to be the obvious choice, right? First, we saw, and this was something that we were discussing months going in, like how was the pitching rotation going to look in the postseason? Obviously, we saw what it looked like. The pitchers couldn't get past the third, right? All their starters. So, you got Bobby Miller, right? Who else after that, right? Are they going to pick up Lynn's option? Probably not, right? After this, I don't think they've. Does Kershaw come back? Another, who knows, right? And then you got guys like Stone and Pepio. They're all going to be young guys, if for the most part, right? And then you got a returning Walker Buehler that you don't know what's going to happen with Walker Buehler. So they're definitely going to look at guys like Snell and Nola. And then I don't know if somebody like Shohei is still in their plans, right? Because he's not going to pitch next season anyways. If they do get a Shohei, he's just going to hit. So and then like I said, they need guys that are going to perform in October. And with Shohei, that's another, you don't know. He's never been in October, right? I mean, he's been in the WBC and Japan series, stuff like that. But what if he comes over and it's the same thing with him? It's like they need guys that are going to step up in October. And that, I think that's probably the hardest thing to find.
Yeah. I think they really just need, in terms of, we talked about it earlier this year, getting a lot more youth, getting kids involved in the roster, and they started doing that. Vargas got his chance, didn't work out. Michael Busch, I mean, is he part of their plans next year? I'm not too sure, because I feel like he's probably their best trade chip for whatever they're looking for, whether it is a veteran bat or an elite starter that's on the market. But I really think they just kind of need more of young players, because I feel like a lot of the teams that we're seeing, especially in the National League, Like the Phillies, they have a lot of young talent. The Diamondbacks, they have a lot of young talent. These are teams that are more than likely playing in the next round now, and they're feeding off that. And we need guys that are hungry for the moment. And the current Dodgers roster, just because they've been there so long, like we're going on 11 plus years now of being in the playoffs, maybe they've lost that hunger and you kind of need a refresh with it. So I definitely think they need to get younger. Trust, if you're not going to use your prospects that you have, you got to trade them. Like,
Yep.
I get prospect holding because it works out, but someone tweeted out earlier and it made a lot of sense. I'm like the core with Bellinger, Seager, and Urias. They didn't trade those guys, and they did peak. They went to 3 World Series in 5 years, won one. But now these other guys that they've held on to, like Dustin May, and others, they're really like a liability right now, and they didn't trade them when they were at peak value. So they got to do something. They have a lot of pitching depth, and we've seen it. And teams need pitching, and we could probably get a good amount of stuff for those guys. So I expect a lot of shuffling with the roster.
How would you feel about trading Michael Busch and Gavin Stone for Tyler Glasnow and Randy Arozarena?
Yeah, I'm 100% on board with that because I've already been tweeting it out. I'm trying to put it in existence. Rays, Dodgers, they have the connection. I like Glasnow. He didn't do too well in the wild card series, but I mean, I think the Dodgers need to get a dependable arm. He has had issues with health. He missed most of the season this year. He didn't come back until almost after, I believe, after the All-Star break. So there is some red flags there, especially, you're looking at this rotation on paper now, like you take away the free agents there. I don't think Lynn comes back. They probably decline his option. I'm 50-50 on Kershaw if he even comes back at all. You really just got Bobby Miller and then Walker Buehler, who's coming off his second Tommy John. And then you're filling out the rest of it with Ryan Pepio, Emmett Sheehan, maybe Gavin Stone. That sounds really like iffy. I feel like they need a dependable arm, and I don't know if they're going to shell out money to the big free agents that we've mentioned because they just haven't shown their ability to do that. Like they can do it, but they choose not to.
Well, and I mean, listen, somebody in here wrote Dylan Cease. If the White Sox trade Dylan Cease, they're going to want the farm because it's the White Sox. So I don't think that's a viable option. But I mean, hey, listen, let's say you have a shot at getting Blake Snell. Let's say that's a real possibility. I mean, you sign him to a 2-3 year deal. Why not? Like, I mean, I understand that there's going to be a lot of suitors because that market's thin. But I mean, if you go in with the fair offer, I know he'll consider it because my man, I know, wants to win. And so, that gives you an opportunity. And I don't know, there's this guy named Cody Bellinger that I think, I mean, I said it before the season started. I think it was Juan that was giving me garbage about it, that I told him that when he went to Chicago, he was going to have a resurgence of a year. And that's exactly what happened. He went out there and did the thing, and now he's going to get paid. I don't know what he's going to get paid. It definitely ain't going to be that $12 million option that the Cubs got on him. But, I mean, he has, they're obviously, a lot of folks wrote him off. I had a feeling that he was going to go there and do the thing, and he did. So, I mean, I don't know. And I think if he were to come back, I don't think he would have the same amount of pressure that he had while he was there. And the reason I mean that is because you have other, if they go out and get these guys, not saying that's what they're going to do. This is just what I would do if I were the armchair GM. Then having a lot of these other guys alleviates that pressure on just one guy. But also, everyone has to buy into what it is, right? Be that as it may, you still have to execute, right? You still got to go out and hit the damn ball. But I mean, that's at least what I would look at to see what they can do, because I agree with you. They have to inject some new blood. I love Max Muncy. I really do. But if it was true that the Cardinals were kicking the tires on trading Nolan, go out and get Nolan. You get an elite glove and an elite bat that is going to be really hard to find in the market. And also, if let's say the Glasnow thing isn't a possibility, Michael Busch, Nolan, I don't know, Michael Grove,
Yeah.
You know,
I mean, just looking at the roster, pulling it up for who their projected free agents are, they have a lot of position players, Kiki, JD, Colton Wong, David Peralta, these guys are all on expiring contracts. They're gone. Maybe they come back. I feel like the only one out of that bunch that I think is worth an offer is probably JD, and it really just depends on how they go about either Otani or I think another option to replace JD in the DH spot. We talked about it, I believe, off air, but Max Muncy, he has a club option that they're more than likely going to pick up. It's only 14 million, just because his batting average was extremely low. The home runs, it pays for that contract right there by itself. So I believe they'll pick that up. But then other than that, there's a lot of guys that are coming off the books. And there's a couple guys that may get their options declined for their club options. First one that hits me off the bat, Blake Trinan. Dude's probably been in limbo for 2 years now. He has a club option for $7 million. I would probably see the Dodgers declining that. Joe Kelly's another interesting guy because, he has had a little bit of resurgence with the velocity. He looked pretty good in the playoffs since the Dodgers got him, but he has a 9.5 option. I could see the Dodgers maybe picking it up because they're probably going to need some dependable guys in that bullpen, but I could see them just because 9.5 for a reliever, it's pretty steep, even for the Dodgers. So I don't know. They could decline that one. And then Alex Reyes, who was supposed to be on that bullpen that was from the Cardinals, he has the option too for $3 million. They probably just pick that up because hopefully he comes back healthy, plug him in there. But other than that, they have 20 players that are potential or could be potential free agents. So it's going to be a big roster crunch this offseason.
I will say this. I think they should keep Kike for starters. I think because every clubhouse needs a clubhouse guy, but also it's not that he's a scrub either. He plays multiple positions, and he can swing the wood pretty good. I agree with you. I think they'll keep Joe Kelly because Joe Kelly actually, I mean, he was actually having a great run. It's just the offense couldn't do what they could do. And JD Martinez is a very interesting one because I think JD Martinez obviously outplayed his $10 million. I don't know. I mean, he's 35. So, I mean, is he going to try to get multiple years? I mean, obviously every guy wants to go get multiple years from somebody. But I mean, if the Dodgers really came in and said, hey, man, we'll give you 2 years at, I don't know, 30, like that, I feel like that'd be a fair offer. And
Yeah.
it's not like it's a boatload of money, but also, I mean, you could tell he likes the environment, he likes the vibe. And, it's the old adage of if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Yeah.
So, keep it going. The guy that I'm thinking quite a bit is Kershaw. I honestly think, I mean, granted, we don't know the extent of what Kershaw's shoulder situation is. I mean, we don't know if he's going to need surgery or any of that. I mean, I feel like if it's surgery, in my mind, he has to retire. Just because.
I mean, if I'm gonna give my honest opinion, Kershaw is probably my favorite player of all time. I named my child after him, and the thing is that I look at the roster and where do you go from after this to now? And I think Kershaw puts a burden kind of on the rotation because you sign him back to that 1-year deal with worth however much you want, and then you have him for whatever reason, it ends up being that he's that frontline guy and they don't need him. They can't have him be in that role, but bringing him back in whatever way they construct the roster, it just seems like it always ends up being that way. I think they owe it to Kershaw to test if he wants to go back to Texas, but they also owe it to Kershaw if he even wants to play anymore
Yeah.
because the amount of injuries that he has gone through and then what happened in that game 1, he may want to come back, but I mean, I wrote an article about it. I was like, he's clearly not healthy. Like, I know his velocity was up a tick, but that doesn't, in terms of pitching injuries, the worst one's the elbow. The second one is the shoulder. Those are
Yeah.
like 2 injuries that derail your career, and not many guys can come back from those injuries, and especially when they're over 35. I mean, Justin Verlander was like the outlier to get Tommy John at his age and then come back and still pitch at an elite level, even now where I'm pushing 40 years old. So it doesn't happen. And Kershaw, I tweeted out he's been plagued with injuries since probably 2015, whether it's the back the back was the big thing for
Yeah.
years. It seemed like every year he went on the IL because to just rest that back. And then now it turned into in 21 with forearm and elbow, and then now it's turning into the shoulder. Like your body doesn't get better. And I feel like the Dodgers just can't keep wasting roster spots for guys that only play a percentage of the year. Because, at the end of the day, we already said, no matter what the Dodgers do, I trust them to put together a good team that gets to the playoffs. It's about what are you going to do with the playoffs? And I think Kershaw, where he's at in his stage, just isn't a good pitcher to depend on come October. And these younger teams, they were ready to pounce on him. Before, he was a figure you looked at, you're like, oh, that's Clayton Kershaw on the mound. I don't really think people really see that now. And that's not to do with anything with like what he's had with the postseason before, but it's
Right.
just kind of where he's at in his career now.
Well, let's also call a spade too. Originally, with the construction of this roster, he wasn't supposed to be the frontline starter. It was supposed to be Julio Urias. Obviously, circumstances changed the situation, and we are here now. So, I mean, that attrition obviously affects where we're at now as well, because and granted, we don't know, right? We don't know how much different anything would have been because from the get-go, the starting pitching has just been the storyline of this entire series. I mean, who knows? Julio Diaz could have pitched out shutout ball, right? We don't know. They may have asked him to throw on short rest to avoid elimination. It's hard to say. Be that as it may, I feel like Clayton Kershaw, to a certain degree, is also being scapegoated, and I don't feel like that's right in the sense of that because again, the roster wasn't constructed the way that it is now originally going into it, and these are the cards that we've all been dealt, is what it is. Roger, which would you rather have? Would you rather have, we send Kershaw off into the sunset, or I forget the saying in English, whatever it is, when you send them off the way that you need to send them off and you hand it off to the kids, or would you want to hold on to the dream for one more year? Or third option, he goes to Texas and does whatever there.
I mean, I think, the Dodgers organization knows that, Kershaw has been the face of this franchise for many years, and they're going to let him do whatever he wants to do. If he wants to come back, I think they'll bring him back. There's still those milestones that I think Kershaw would want to reach. The 3,000 strikeouts. I think he'd want to do that as a Dodger. I mean, but they were asking him tonight, just right now, and he was saying he doesn't know. Again, he doesn't know what the future holds. So, I mean, I'd say he's either close to maybe retiring. I think that would be a higher percentage than I think him going off to like Texas. Now, if Texas goes on to the World Series and wins, I mean, I don't know. Does he want to join them after, or I mean, I don't know. But I think the Dodgers. If Kershaw wants to come back, I think there's no way they're gonna say, you know what, we don't want you anymore, and we're gonna let you go. I think if he wants to be a Dodger, he's gonna be a Dodger, and that's just the way it's gonna be. But I mean, they can't obviously look at him as like their number one dude, obviously anymore, right? It's got to be built around these other guys, and it's going to be young guys, like you said, Bobby Miller, Ryan Pepio. Those are the guys that are going to have to take, the steering wheel next year, and whoever they can get to come in, whether it's a Blake Snell or Aaron Nola, they trade for Glass now, or whoever it is. I think that's how they're going to build the starting rotation. And we think these guys are here now, like Bobby Miller or Grove, but that might not be the case. I mean, come April, they might be guys in that rotation. We have no idea who they are, right now at this moment, and they'll be there in April.
Great example, Emmett Sheehan. That dude came out of nowhere with the RKO. I mean, out of nowhere. Looking at the comments, someone said to add Soto at the deadline. I don't think Juan Soto would fit this roster if I'm completely honest. I there's just not even like statistically it doesn't really make sense, but also I mean it just creates that logjam again with the outfield, right? I mean that's just how I look at it. He just doesn't, and also he's going to cost an astronomical amount of money. I mean if he's turning down, I mean I still think he's insane for turning down. It was reportedly like $430 million. That's still, bro. If someone said we're going to offer you $430 million, I'd be like, yo, where can you back the Brinks truck up to my house? Because I will sign that deal. Someone said, let's see, where is it? Young Hoo Lee, who is the Korean Ichiro and plays outfield. I don't know who that is, but I'll look into that. Michael Carrillo also pointing out that Max Muncy is not worth it. I mean, again, it's hard. The game has changed. It's not just about average anymore. I mean, we've talked about it on the show. If Max Muncy wasn't worth anything, they wouldn't be talking about it. They wouldn't have offered him the deal they offered him anyway, to begin with. So there's that. Sports Empire, who I am also convinced is Juan Ramirez, but I digress. Definitely worth bringing Kelly back. Hernandez is just a fan favorite, but the man is done. I disagree with that respectfully, Sports Empire. I think Kike definitely still has. I mean, he's only 31, so it's not like he's washed. But you know, there's still plenty there to go. Our best bullpen in years squandered from Mr. Dog. I agree with you 100%. The bullpen was lights out, and it's just a damn shame that we couldn't do anything. Let's see. Well, Michael Carrillo, average does matter, but what does it matter if you're hitting for average if you can't get RBIs? I mean, what's the point? I mean, if I go out and hit 300, but we can't win any games, then what's the point? It's just the reality. Santana from the Mets. Whoever, I think it's KRAD2K that said that. Interesting. Again, thank you all for joining us here on the live. The Los Angeles Dodgers go down 4-2 in Phoenix tonight. I was looking for the names that people brought up: Benji Gill, Ozzie and Joe Madden. Benji Gill, I would consider. Ozzie and no. Joe Madden, maybe, but I don't think he would jive with this front office. If I'm completely honest.
What do you mean he wouldn't jive? He's an Andrew Freeman disciple.
I know he is, but I don't think he would jive in the sense of with the coaching staff that's I'm sorry, not coaching staff, the front office that's there in the sense of what ownership wants. Just because Freeman wants a certain thing, if ownership comes in and says, hey, this is what we want, it doesn't matter what Freeman wants. It's what ownership wants. Yeah, whereas in Anaheim, it's what Artie wanted.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really see this Dodgers ownership group though as like being like a lot of hands-on, like say like Artie is. I think it's kind of like they kind of just let things run through Friedman, right? I mean, if they were more hands-on, you would think, well, maybe Friedman's job would be, you know, kind of in trouble right now, right? I mean, because we were saying that like Friedman's not going to fire Dave really if Friedman's kind of telling Dave what to do, because then it's kind of you know, then it's kind of like firing himself, you know. So it's got to come from the top, obviously. And if the Guggenheim group is fine with Friedman, you know.
But we've also heard as well that they'll step in when they need to. I mean, we've heard that from the brass themselves. So I mean, I that's why I don't think that would work, because then you also have to deal with, you fired Dave Roberts. I mean, again, if we're gonna look at call a spade, is Joe Madden an equal to Dave Roberts?
No, I like Dave Roberts better. So I don't think Dave should be fired, and there's a lot of arguments for that. And he had like in active managers, you know, he has one of the best winning percentages as a manager. They mentioned, I believe, during the broadcast, but I brought it up a while ago. It's around 630, which is like he gets another World Series. You're talking about him being probably the best manager in Dodgers history. In terms of wins, winning percentage, and then, you know, I mean, champions is the end all be all for a lot of us fans, but you kind of have to look at the other sides of his managing as well. You know, there's only so much he can do, and we mentioned it even in the live. The thing that he has the most control over is one, the lineup, and two, who he ends up putting in for pitching, whether it's like the bullpen, what decisions he's made, and we argued like all season, what he did with this roster and this group of guys who a team that was projected to win like 88 wins on Fangraphs, they end up winning 100. I mean, that a lot of that was because of Mookie and Freddie at the top, but a big chunk of that is what Dave Roberts did to keep this group close. I think he's a great manager, and I can understand the fans' frustrations. They want changes. I just don't get your hopes up that you think Dave's going to be fired. If anyone's getting fired, it's some of the other coaches. I think the big one is probably Van Scoyoc. I feel like if you're going to make anyone a scapegoat for the offense, that's your guy right there. But even then, I don't really think they make many changes in the coaching staff because, we mentioned it. They're so in line with the front office, and the front office is in line with the ownership. If none of them have any issue with how the season ended and they really do think it's just a crapshoot, then they're probably just going to retool, restructure, and hope for different results in 2024. And, it sucks for us fans to hear that, especially once they lose in the NLDS. But, I mean, you got to get to the playoffs first, and then you got to piece it together after that. And they had a lot of, like you mentioned, a lot of cards were dealt their way. The roster wasn't supposed to be this way. The rotation that was the biggest one. They've had so many injuries, and they've had a couple off the field issues, and that pretty much derailed the season.
And here's real quick. Here's the thing with Roberts. Like, I see Michael Carrillo definitely wants Roberts gone. He's mentioning a guy like Greg Counsell. What has Greg Counsell done?
He's going to the Mets. So.
I mean, but what has he done?
Yeah.
I mean, so nothing. the thing with Roberts.
Someone even said Buck Showalter, and it's like, listen, I love Buck, but Buck
he's
isn't
retiring.
better than Dave.
He's going back to MLB Network.
the thing with Roberts is he gets players to buy in, right? Players to do and kind of do what they have to do. Like, I've been seeing a lot of, he doesn't motivate them. These are professional freaking baseball players, the best of the best, the 1% of the 1%, right? The top. Like, if these players can't motivate themselves to play in a freaking playoff game, I mean, come on, what is it? Roberts was going, hey, dude, you got to go out there and you got to perform. Is that what you want Roberts to like tell them? Like, these players have to do it amongst themselves, right? Like, I don't know in what world people live in that you want to, like, if I go to my job and I don't do my job, yeah, my boss is gonna get fired, right? Cool, that's cool, right? No, right? It's gonna be me, right? I mean, you got to take accountability. The players have to take accountability, and if they're not performing, they're not performing. We had Carroll's on recently, and we've talked about this plenty of times. When Dave Roberts got hired, before he got hired, who was the person that was the number one choice that they were going to hire? It was pretty much almost done. Who was that person? It was Gabe Kapler. Now, Gabe Kapler's gone on, had some other jobs, and he's gotten all fired from all of them. Imagine if Gabe Kapler would have took over this team 8 years ago. You think the Dodgers are in the same position? Do you think they're in the same position as they are today?
Well, and even then, like I don't know who it was, said that Dave Roberts has no skills. Listen, at the end of the day, if you've never been in a clubhouse, you don't understand the dynamic of the shit that managers have to deal with, because managers have to deal with all sorts of personalities, because at the end of the day too, they're professional baseball players. Some of them are crazy, because if you're the 1% of the 1%, you have a screw that's loose somewhere, and you have to be able to be managed by people in order to kind of reel you in a little bit. So again, that's the job of a manager. A manager is able to kind of keep the core together without it tethering and falling apart. Dave is really good at that. Like, Phil Jackson is a great example of another guy that could do that, because Michael Jordan is a crazy man, but he was able to reel him in and kind of get the rest of the team to understand what they needed to do to win. And that's what Dave has done. And Dave has done a fantastic job about that. That's why I don't stand for Dave Roberts slander, because clubhouses are already an incredibly odd dichotomy, and if you've never been in one, you just don't understand. But at the end of the day too, not only does he understand that this is the way the game is now, whether I like it as an old head or not, is you have to game plan. You have to manage what the game plan is. And it's not even just the matchups, it's just analytics now. But Dave has a really good feel for both how you need to manage the person and how you need to manage the statistics. If you can't do that in this era of baseball, then you're not going to have longevity. And that's why Dave Roberts has had longevity, because he understands how to manage all of that. So for me, I think that's where it's out of pocket, in the sense of saying, hey, you got to fire him because he doesn't have any skills. Well, okay. So then what skills does Joe Madden have that Dave Roberts doesn't have? But that's what I don't understand in all this, right? Craig Cancel. Craig Cancel, I think you're right, Cody. I think he's going to be a Met. Like that, and it's like, I wouldn't touch that job with the 10-foot pole, if I'm completely honest. And that's just because that's got its own problems. But Dave Roberts has gone out and managed all of this well. And even the off the field issues, Trevor Bauer's situation, Julio Diaz's situation, where in some teams that's a clubhouse vibe killer to the extreme. And they've done a fantastic job of managing that, being able to get everybody here.
And for example, look at down the San Diego job, right? They hired Bob Melvin. Bob Melvin was considered a good manager, right? With the A's, he did a great job there, right? Yeah. He goes to San Diego, and he's giving all these superstars, right? And it's not that easy. You can't just put a bunch of superstars and expect them to gel and to run. Look at all the issues they've had. I mean, there's a lot of issues there within the players. That's why that team, I think, has not been able to gel. And I don't see them gelling, because until either of those players kind of learn to this is how it's supposed to be done, or Melvin really knows how to finesse that clubhouse, I don't see them having success.
No, and you're 1,000% right. And I think a part of the issue down there is one thing that a good manager does is, for instance, with the Dodgers, you have Mookie Betts, Freddie Freeman, Clayton Kershaw, and a bunch of other really good baseball players. Like Chris Taylor would probably be an everyday starter somewhere else, right? But he's playing in the bench. He's being paid a lot of money to play on the bench, but he's playing bench. But these are guys that are alphas to begin with. They've always been the guy. Everywhere they've played, they've been the guy. And you have that mixture of an attitude, and that's how they carry themselves. You got to know how to manage that. You get a bunch of alphas in San Diego, and that's a part of the issue, is they can't manage those things. That's not on Bob Melvin. That's not 100% on Bob Melvin, because at the end of the day, that's the culture that was there when he got there. So he was just trying to kind of, keep the peace, if you will, so that way there's no issues. Dave Roberts has done a fantastic job of all of that. And then you throw in everyone that is above him with the expectations. Hey, our whole thing is we want to win championships every year. That's the mindset that everyone needs to buy into. How hard is it at your job, if you work with 5 people, to get people to buy into just one sort of cultural thing? It's really hard. Imagine that with alphas that are the 1% of the 1% at what they do for a living. It's even harder. So Dave does a fantastic job of navigating all of that. Oh, and on top of that, it's one of the biggest media markets in the country. So he has to navigate the scrutiny that comes with that as well. And so Aaron Boone is a guy that comes to mind. I feel so bad for the guy, but at the same time, the shit sandwich was kind of created on its own, because from ownership down, there's no accountability there, right? And so that's where it makes those sorts of situations difficult. And it's not like the Yankees are a bunch of scrubs either. Let's just call that a spade too. But if you can't manage that, that's the issue you're going to run into. I want to ask you, the both of you, this after we get off that Dave Roberts soapbox. Well, I mean, the one bright spot is Will Smith. Like, Will Smith actually had a pretty good, he had a good game today, 3 for 4 with a double and got a run, and was hitting, I think, four and some change in the series. The Austin Barnes Will Smith thing is interesting, because obviously Austin Barnes is basically Kershaw's personal catcher. So, and I saw a lot of people kind of slandering Austin Barnes, and to a certain degree, rightfully so. It's not like he's a prolific hitter, right? But with that, my question to you guys is, and again, I'm going to the cheap seats for this. Who would you have called up for Austin? Because I saw some people saying don't put him on the roster. Like, what? That's where I'm confused with all of this, because I feel like everyone's just pulling hairs. Am I right to looking at it that way, that we're splitting hairs at this point?
No, I mean, they kind of just used what they had on their bench. And I mean, using Barnes in that situation, would I have done it? I mean, people were posting the statistics for Peralta that since July, and he's had a 550 OPS. I think I'm probably going to ride with him giving a better at bat than Austin Barnes. And one side of that is like, all right, well, I don't want to burn through my catcher, my backup catcher, in case something happens, even though it is late in the game. And then two, it's Austin Barnes. Like, we can't sugarcoat it. He's not the best offensive player. And especially in that spot, we've seen him come up clutch in the past, but this season has been just such a bad season from him. I wouldn't have done it, but like, I guess I can understand it when you're playing the matchups. But yeah, I kind of probably would have just wrote it out with let me see what Peralta can do. I believe it was lefty. It would have been lefty on lefty. But other than that, someone did tweet it out earlier. This would have been a great spot for Amid Rosario, who was unfortunately left off the roster. So you can treat that with how you want, but we didn't really have many options on the bench at that point in the game. It was Barnes. It was either you were riding with putting Barnes in or you were riding with Peralta. And I think probably both cases, you're probably getting the Diamondbacks are getting out of that inning.
No, you're right. I mean, and back to kind of the original point of something that Roger said. I do think this one, for sure, as a fan, hurts a lot more than in years past. But I think we've said this before, but I think out of all of the, the last, what is it, 4 playoffs, playoff outs, exits, or however you want to word it. I think this is the one where you kind of have to do the whole, like, look in the mirror and like, hey, what do we need to do to avoid this issue? And I think to a certain degree, Dave Roberts a little bit ago said, quote, the regular season, I think we do a great job, but the last couple of postseasons, it just hasn't gone well for us. So I've got to figure it out. I think, that's where accountability starts, right? It starts with being able to kind of look at it and admit, hey, we got to figure this out. Like, what is it that's wrong? And I think, obviously, like we've alluded to for the last little bit, it's going to require for sure some roster overhaul. Like, that's going to start there. But even then, like, let's say this keeps happening, playing devil's advocate. At that point, is it one of those that you do have to put it on either? At this point, in my opinion, it's Andrew Freeman. I think that's where the buck has to stop. I don't think it's Dave Roberts. But if Dave Roberts goes out and does this again, then who do we have to? And nothing changes, but they go out and overhaul the roster, add some pieces. Let's say they go out and make some splashes. Hell, let's even say they bring Shohei. I don't think they're bringing Shohei, but let's say they go get Shohei, and then it's another cataclysmic failure. Then what do we attribute it to at that point? Then, Roger?
Yeah, eventually, like I said, even if it's not, Dave Roberts, it's not the hitting coach. The blame's going to be put somewhere eventually, right? So whether
right.
That's going to fall on Dave Roberts eventually, right? And if the same thing happens, eventually him or Andrew Freeman or someone's going to fall. That's just what people have to do. Okay, we're going to give it a fresh start, and we're going to axe this guy, and we're going to move forward. But and I know it's an excuse, and I know a lot of people are talking about it. It's the playoff format. That's what they need to figure out, because today was the 3rd game that the Dodgers had played in the last 10 days. And especially too when in this series, how it was like, it never felt like it really got started. Like, you played a game on Saturday, then you stop, then you played a game, then you stop, then you played a game. It was like you're going like this, right? So I know that's an excuse, and they're not going to use it. But you're going to have Dodgers are out, Orioles are out, Braves are one loss from being out. That's the top 3 records in MLB this season. All could be out in the first round. So, but then you got the Astros, right? Astros just keep chugging along, and they figured it out, and they're moving forward. So that, I think, is when Dave Roberts says we need to figure it out. They need to figure out if they're going to go in as the division winner, how they're going to get by that layoffs. That's what they need to figure out. Or, it makes more sense just go in as a wild card and you stay hot and keep playing. But I think that's where the issue that they need to figure that out.
That's going to be the biggest topic, I believe, this offseason, is because I mean, everyone's given, a lot of crap to Braves fans who have been probably the most vocal about this. Um, Having days off for baseball sucks. It sucks. It ruins the rhythm. And Roger, you're right. This series, it felt jagged. We start one day, have an off day, start another day. All right, then we have a travel day, and then we start today. So there was really no room for, either team to get in a rhythm. But the thing that the D-backs had going is that they played every single game in the regular season was must win for them. Even though they lost the series against the Astros, they still had to play competitive baseball. Then they play the wild card round where those games matter. You're winning to move on in the next round, and then you play the Dodgers, who have been pretty much just kicking rocks, waiting to see who they're going to be playing between the Brewers and the D-backs. And it's hard to stay competitive that way, especially with that much layoff. Um, I wouldn't be surprised if they probably start talking about changing it up now, because it's fun for fans and for I guess the sport to have these teams come up and surprise. But I can tell you for a fact that the MLB at some point, if it keeps happening, they're going to be checking their wallets. They're going to be checking the TV ratings, and no way you sugarcoat it. Teams like the Braves and the Dodgers, those are the teams that people want to watch. Those are the teams that the country's watching. They're going to push for it. So it's definitely going to be a discussion this offseason.
Real quick,
Well, I will say this.
I just want to thank Zach Apple. We have this super supporter thing now, and you guys could actually support the site. So Zach donated to the site. Thank you, Zach. And yeah, it is like he mentioned also. It's an excuse, right, to say, yeah, the layoff is hurting them. That's what I'm saying. They need to figure it out what they're going to do in that layoff, because obviously Houston is figuring it out, and they're back in the LCS. So for whatever it is affecting some teams, and you got to figure it out, because if there's another team that can do it, you got to be able to figure it out.
Well,
I'm not going to use it as an excuse. Like at the end of the day, the offense, they have to break away somehow. I just think I'm pretty sure that the MLB is going to definitely, because I feel like the MLB Players Association is probably going to push for some type of reseeding, especially from these top teams. But I don't know. They change it every year now.
Well, it'd have to come from the union, but also the other thing is the reason it won't change in the near future is the TV deals. The TV deals is what dollar bill, y'all. Like at the end of the day, that's what it comes down to. I mean, even with college football, why do you think there's been so much realignment? Because of money. So with TV money being such a big factor, nothing's going to change if that's what's paying. If that's what's keeping the lights on, nothing's going to change. Um, I just saw this stat a second ago that I will be honest, I didn't know this stat until a few moments ago, but it's kind of wild that with the Los Angeles Dodgers, that this is a stat. Starting pitchers only went 4 2/3 innings, 13 earned runs with an ERA of 25 through 3 games. That's insane. I mean, I honestly, that's like, I mean, obviously they've bowed out the last few postseasons, but that's not a stat I expected to see. Especially with, I mean, it's not like these guys are scrubs either. Let's also be honest.
And you know what's incredible? It actually got lowered today with the Lance Lynn's performance of only 4 runs. I think it was up like at 42 or something like that. And Lance came in and it actually lowered.
But I mean, but that's baseball for you, man. I mean, that's what's crazy. So all right. So as we start to wrap this thing up, I want to again thank everyone that joined us and chimed in. We are all here in mourning and in pain. And who I feel bad for is the likes of Juan Ramirez, who I know is in pain somewhere on a softball diamond, not because his kiddo is having a miserable game, but because the Dodgers lost. And so I want to thank everyone for joining us here. As we wrap this thing up, I'll start with you, Cody. What is the hot take that you have going into this off season that's going to happen? Obviously it won't be tomorrow, but whenever the new league year is, what's your hot take for that?
I mean, there's a lot of stuff that you can go around. But I'll go with the hot take in the room. I think there's a very high chance that they move on from Roberts. I feel like at some point they kind of have to look at it. We'll find out, I guess, in a couple of days when they do their meeting. That would be my big one, and then the other one would just be that they move on from Kershaw. Whether it's just that they say they're going to let him test the market or whatever, but maybe they don't offer him a contract if they don't see him in their plans for that season. That would be my big one. But yeah, I don't really see anything else major really happening. I feel like that's the only thing that could change, like big change, is if one of those two guys isn't on the team next year.
Roger?
I don't think they're gonna move on from like Roberts. I mean, I could see Kershaw leaving, but I think they're gonna get Shohei. I really feel like they're gonna get Shohei. I think it's gonna be kind of like, hey, we've struggled, we've had early exits the last couple of years. But here's Shohei. It's the start of a new era in Dodger baseball, and I think they bring on Shohei.
So number one, tipping the cap to Arizona because they just outplayed the Dodgers. I mean, that's just the reality. That's kind of the lead that's being buried is they came out and just played better. They managed the game just a little bit better. I think Torey Lovello made the right decisions at the right time. And you can't scrutinize anything that he did. But at the end of the day, I think a tip of the cap again to them because they got hot at the right time. I mean, that's just the reality, right?
And real quick, Alonso, when you're talking about the D-backs, so last Friday was the workout, right? And I sat in for a couple of the press conferences for the D-backs. So it was Lovello, and Lovello seems like a great dude. I mean, he seems like he's brought a culture to Arizona, and it's definitely working for them. In their front office, Hazen and Derek Hall said. So the one thing I took away when I left that, it hit me. I was like, crap, this is going to be a tough series, and it could be an upset. That was because I just heard the way they talked. They knew exactly what they wanted. They're in this division. They were talking about, you're in this division with the Dodgers, and they've seen the Dodgers, and just the way that's kind of where they wanted to get, right? They want to get to that top of that mountain, right? And just the way they talked, just the admiration for the Dodgers, and I knew, if Dodgers are not taking the D-backs in any way seriously at all, this was definitely a possibility, and as we saw it's actually what happened.
Yeah, no, and listen, I said it in the last live, and I said it earlier this year. The D-backs are going to be a problem, and I think they became a problem a year too soon. And they're going to continue to be a problem. They've been building a great team over there for the last couple of years. They've done a fantastic job of acquiring guys. Zach Allen is a guy that comes to mind, and they've tied up Corbin Carroll. I mean, they've got some dudes, so they're going to be a problem. I think they will be a problem before the San Diego Padres are. That's a hot take as well. But I think I don't think they're going to move on from Dave Roberts. I just laugh because, again, give me three guys that are better than or equal to Dave Roberts that you can replace him with. There's not that list is Torey Lovello's on that list, but it's a very, very short list. Number two, I think that might have been the last we saw of Clayton Kershaw. Knowing Kershaw and the competitor that he is, I know that's not how he wants to go out, but I also know that he would want to go out on his shield. And so I think, as much as it pains me to say it, is I think that's the last that we saw of Kershaw. And realistically, I think that the last hot take I have is I think they're going to be louder than they were this past offseason in the sense of going out and being aggressive and making moves to acquire guys, because to something that Cody said earlier, it's fine and dandy to have all of these prospects and to hoard prospects. But if they're not either producing at the big league level or they're not ready yet, but you have a surplus of them, then what's the point of hoarding them if you're not able to flip them into something that can get you results now? And I think that's one of the things you're going to look at in the mirror is, okay, Diego Cartaya might be 2 years away still, but if you can win now, and I mean, the perfect example is when they sent Glaber over to the Nationals. Granted, they don't have Trey anymore, but they were, that worked out for a little while, right? So I mean, again, it's a win now. What have you done for me lately? Business to begin with, and I think that's what's going to happen is they're going to go out and I think be really aggressive in the trade market to overhaul this roster, because if you're going to let a lot of these guys go, well, then you got to have a way to plug those holes to improve your team. And so I think that's where it's going to be really heavily focused on in this offseason to kind of reconstruct everything and go from there. If there is a coach that is going to be fired, I do think Roger's right. I think they're going to move on from Vince. I can't ever say his last name.
And Squilyak.
And Squilyak, thank you. I think that's, out of all of the coaches they have, that's really the only one that if you were to kind of like scrutinize, he's the guy. But even then, how can you scrutinize him when Freddie, Freeman, Max Muncy, JD Martinez, and Mookie Betts all had over 100 RBIs? So it's one of those where, it goes back and forth in the sense of what you can move on from. Definitely don't fire Josh Bard, because whatever Josh Bard and Mark Pryor are doing, let them keep cooking, man, because that bullpen was lights out. Well, we will wrap this guy up. Again, thank you, everyone that joined us. I did see something from the cheap seats that I wanted to mention. Even the A's should beat us. I thought that was a good the A's catching a stray in it here. But I think again, we just have to tip our cap to the Arizona Diamondbacks, man. They outplayed the Dodgers, and they went on to sweep the Dodgers, and they move on to the NLCS. And I honestly think the Phillies are going to advance. That's a hot take that I'll put out there. But I said that also a little while ago, and that would be a fun series, because if you got two hot hands going into the NLCS, that's going to be a really fun series. But on that note, myself, Alonso. Oh, go ahead, Roger. Sorry.
Real quick. So Phillies D-backs, I think Phillies advance too. I want to get you guys picks too. Phillies Rangers in the World Series.
Phillies Astros in the World Series.
I'll go Phillies Astros, and I think we get our first repeat champion.
Ah, okay. All right. I like that. I'm thinking of I'm giving the Phillies the edge.
Yeah. I mean, I was worried that if the Dodgers even advanced, I thought they were probably, with the way things were lining up with their offense and the pitching. I mean, like, I live in the Philadelphia area. I mean, on paper, how they played today, like, I watched that game earlier. I was like, the Braves aren't beating this team. I don't think the Dodgers could even beat this team right now. I really had, like, D-backs gave it to us, but I have a really hard chance of seeing the D-backs upset the Phillies with how they have it right now, because, Dodgers should just take a couple notes from them and how they build their roster, because they have like a 6-man rotation. They got a lineup 1 through 9, but I just think I like the Astros still, and they continue to prove a lot of us wrong, especially with the World Series last year. But that's where I'll go.
I mean, if anything, the Astros have been nothing but consistent. I mean, all asterisks and all those things aside, they've been consistent, and I think the other guy who's on that list, but I don't think he will leave Houston and manage anywhere else, is Dusty Baker. I mean, that again, if you don't have those guys that can kind of get everyone to buy in with everything that's gone on, this is just where it's at, man. But I do agree with you, man. The Phillies, I talk about this a lot again in 2017 when the Nationals just punched the Dodgers in the mouth and they went on to make a run. Sometimes what it is, or I'm sorry, 19. Sometimes when you get magic in a bottle, that's just the way that it goes. And you know what? The D-backs, someone said it here a little bit ago. They went from the worst record to making the playoffs, and that's the game of baseball. Sometimes that's how it goes. It catches everyone by surprise, and here we are. So Roger, I know you don't. I mean, I'll just say it. I mean, you're going to say the Phillies are winning the World Series, right?
I don't know. I mean, the Rangers, if you recall, I didn't even think the Rangers were going to make the playoffs this season. I said
That's
earlier,
because you hate Corey Seager, but I digress.
No, I like Corey Seager, but I mean they've been playing really good baseball as well. I think if you get a Ranger Philly World Series, it's going to be pretty good. I don't know, man. I think the Rangers could actually win it all this year.
And you know what's crazy about that? Without Max Scherzer,
I mean, freaking Nathan Eovaldi, man. I mean, if that would have been a pickup the Dodgers could have done, I mean, that dude is freaking just incredible in the postseason as well.
yeah, oh yeah, that's a guy that I would have loved to have had here, but here we are. Well, listen, man, everyone that joined us, thank you. I know at some point we'll do another episode and we'll catch up with all y'all. But for everyone that joined us and chimed in, thank you again. We really appreciate it. To I forgot Zach Apple who was active in here and threw us some coin. Thank you as well. I didn't know that was a thing until a few minutes ago. So Zach Apple, thank you for breaking that news to me. So I did not know that was a thing. But from everyone here at Bleed Lows Podcast, we really appreciate you. We will catch you down the road. Stay safe. Don't drink too many. It's not worth the sadness. And don't drink and drive. All right. We will catch you down the road. Thank you all.